The morning sun slanted through the windows of our Baker Street rooms as I watched Poirot fold his meticulously pressed suits into a leather valise. After 3 months of uninterrupted cases, we had finally carved out a week for the countryside, a prospect I anticipated with considerable relief. "Hastings, you have remembered the boot polish?" "Yes," Poirot asked, examining a pair of patent leather shoes with the intensity he usually reserved for bloodstains. "It's a country inn, Poirot, not Buckingham Palace. The standards of Hercule Poirot do not alter with geography." A sharp knock interrupted his reply. Our landlady announced a Mr. Septimus Cole from the London and Scottish Bancassurance Company. Poirot's eyes gleamed with that particular light I had come to recognize. The light that meant our holiday was already slipping away. Mr. Cole was a thin, anxious man who declined tea and came directly to business. "Gentlemen, 3 days ago, one of our policyholders died under circumstances that require immediate investigation. Mr. Ronald Maltraverse of Marsden Manor in Essex. Internal hemorrhage, according to the death certificate. An unfortunate medical event," I offered. "Hardly requires a detective. Under ordinary circumstances, Captain Hastings, I would agree. However, Mr. Maltraverse secured a life insurance policy with our company just 6 weeks ago. £50,000, the figure hung in the air between us. I felt my eyebrows rise involuntarily. Poirot ceased his packing entirely. "That is a substantial sum, monsieur, and the premiums, they would be considerable." "No, indeed. Which brings me to the heart of the matter." Cole extracted a folder from his briefcase. "Our inquiries reveal that Mr. Maltraverse was on the verge of bankruptcy. His estate, his investments, everything was collapsing. He was, by all accounts, weeks away from complete financial ruin, and then he dies." Poirot murmured, "Leaving his widow a fortune." "Precisely. The policy contains a suicide clause, naturally, no payment if death is self-inflicted. But the death certificate lists natural causes. Dr. Bernard, the local physician, examined the body and found nothing suspicious. Internal hemorrhage, he says, a tragic but natural event." I leaned forward. "What makes you doubt him?" Cole's thin fingers tapped the folder. "Dr. Bernard examined Mr. Maltraverse just 3 weeks before his death. Declared him in perfect health, robust constitution, no underlying conditions. Then suddenly catastrophic internal hemorrhage. There is more, I think," Poirot said softly. "There is. On the evening of his death, 2 shots were heard from the direction of Marsden Manor. A rook rifle was found near the body. Dr. Bernard claims Maltraverse was shooting rooks that afternoon, nothing unusual. But 2 shots, Monsieur Poirot, and a man dead of internal hemorrhage." Poirot's fingers formed a steeple beneath his chin. "You wish us to investigate before you release the £50,000. I wish you to determine the truth. If this was suicide disguised as natural death, the company cannot pay. If it was murder, well, that is a matter for the police. But I must know." An hour later, our bags were transferred from a country inn to a London hotel, and Poirot and I were aboard a train rattling toward Essex. The city gave way to autumn fields, golden and rust beneath a sky that promised rain. Poirot was silent, his eyes half closed, his fingers occasionally twitching as though conducting an invisible orchestra. "You think there's something in it?" I asked. "I think, my friend, that there are questions. And questions, they demand answers." Marsden was a small village. The sort where everyone knows everyone's business, yet pretends otherwise. We found Dr. Bernard's surgery easily enough, a converted cottage with a brass plate dulled by weather. The doctor was elderly, perhaps 70, with fierce white eyebrows and the defensive posture of a man whose professional judgment had been questioned. He received us in a study cluttered with medical texts and anatomical diagrams. "Insurance company sent you, I suppose," he said without preamble. "Waste of time." I examined Maltraverse thoroughly. Death by internal hemorrhage, natural causes. Nothing suspicious about it. Poirot settled into a chair uninvited, his manner pleasant but immovable. "You examined him 3 weeks before his death, I understand." Found him healthy, perfectly healthy, strong man, good constitution. And yet, 3 weeks later, catastrophic hemorrhage. This does not strike you as unusual. Bernard's jaw tightened. Medicine is not an exact science, Monsieur Poirot. Hemorrhages can occur suddenly, without warning. Aneurysm, perhaps. The body holds many secrets. The 2 shots that were heard that evening, shooting rooks. The man enjoyed it. Rook rifle was found right there. Nothing sinister about it, and his state of mind. His financial difficulties. I'm a physician, not a banker. I treat bodies, not balance sheets. Bernard stood abruptly. Maltraverse was a Christian Scientist, if you must know. Didn't believe in worrying about health. That's why he didn't come to me more often. Now I have patients waiting. We found ourselves on the doorstep rather suddenly. The door closed firmly behind us. As we walked back toward the village center, Poirot was quiet. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, a slight discrepancy but significant. What's that, doctor? Bernard tells us that Maltraverse was a Christian Scientist, unconcerned with matters of health. Yet Mr. Cole's notes mention that Mrs. Maltraverse, in her initial statement, expressed surprise at her husband's death because he had been so anxious about his health lately. Which is true, Hastings. A man cannot be both indifferent to his health and anxious about it. Perhaps she was mistaken, perhaps. Or perhaps someone is not telling us the truth. He checked his pocket watch. Come. It is time we met the widow. Mrs. Maltraverse is young, I am told. 28 years old, beautiful. And now, potentially, very wealthy. The afternoon light was fading as we approached Marsden Manor. A substantial Georgian house, set back from the road behind iron gates. The windows reflected the dying sun like watchful eyes. Somewhere in the grounds, rooks cawed their evening chorus, harsh and insistent. Poirot paused at the gate, studying the house with that peculiar intensity of his. Come, Hastings. Let us see what secrets the widow can tell us. The housekeeper led us through Marsden Manor's entrance hall, where afternoon light filtered through tall windows onto furniture that spoke of recent acquisition rather than inheritance. Everything was tasteful, expensive, yet somehow lacked the patina of generations. The carpets were too new, the paintings too carefully chosen, the silver tea service gleaming with insufficient tarnish. This was wealth purchased, not inherited. We waited in the drawing room, where heavy curtains had been partially drawn against the fading light. The silence felt deliberate, oppressive. Then she entered. Mrs. Maltraverse was extraordinarily beautiful. Even grief could not diminish it. She was perhaps 28, with pale skin that seemed almost luminous in the dimmed room. Dark hair arranged simply, and eyes that, though red-rimmed from weeping, remained remarkably composed. Her morning dress was elegant, expertly tailored, expensive. She moved with the grace of someone accustomed to being watched. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, thank you for coming. Her voice was low, controlled. Please sit. Poirot's manner became extraordinarily gentle. Madame, we are most sorry to intrude upon your grief. A few questions only, if you can bear it. She nodded, settling into a chair with practiced elegance. I want to help. I want to understand what happened to my husband. You were married how long? 1 year. Just over 1 year, a tremor in her voice quickly suppressed. We were very happy, and his health, his state of mind, Mrs. Maltraverse's fingers twisted together in her lap. That's what I cannot understand. He seemed anxious these past weeks, worried about his health, though doctor. Bernard assured him repeatedly that he was perfectly sound. I thought it was simply nerves, business pressures perhaps. You were with him when he died. No. I was upstairs, changing for tea. It was around 4 o'clock. I heard shots, distant, from the direction of the study. 2 shots, I think, though I cannot be certain. I thought nothing of it at first. He often shot rooks from the study window. They gather in the elms, you see, making such a terrible noise. She paused, her composure wavering. But then something made me uneasy, a feeling. I went downstairs. And what did you find? The study door was open. He was there in his chair, the rifle on the floor beside him. There was blood, but not much. His face was gray. He looked at me and tried to speak, but couldn't. I rang for the servants, sent immediately for Dr. Bernard. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He died before the doctor arrived, just slipped away. Doctor. Bernard confirmed it was hemorrhage. Yes, internal hemorrhage. He said it could happen suddenly, without warning. That the shock of the rifle's recoil might have triggered something. A weakness in the blood vessels. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Madame, had your husband spoken recently of death? Of premonitions, she looked startled. How did you know? Yes. 2 days before, he said something strange. He said he felt death approaching, that he could sense it. I thought he was being melodramatic. He had been reading philosophy, brooding. I didn't take it seriously, and his business affairs, his finances, Mrs. Maltraverse's expression became defensive. I know nothing of such matters. He handled everything himself. He said it wasn't appropriate for me to concern myself with money, but you knew there were difficulties. I knew nothing. Her tone was firm. Final. Poirot was about to speak again, when movement outside the window caught my attention. A figure was approaching the house with purposeful strides. Tall, military-bearing, tanned face. Captain Black, I murmured. Mrs. Maltraverse turned toward the window. The color drained from her face. Her hand flew to her throat. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible, trembling with what I could only describe as terror. I thought you were on the sea. The housekeeper showed Black into the drawing room. He stopped abruptly upon seeing us, his expression uncomfortable, almost guilty. Mrs. Maltraverse, I came as soon as I heard. I'm terribly sorry about. He noticed her expression and faltered. I know this must seem strange, my being here still. You were supposed to sail, she whispered. Black shifted uncomfortably. Yes, Tuesday week to East Africa. But my uncle died suddenly. I received the telegram Tuesday morning. Had to delay departure, settle his affairs. I've been staying at the Anchor Inn in the village. He looked at Poirot and me. I was here Tuesday evening, actually, dinner guest. Maltraverse seemed in good spirits then. I can hardly believe he's gone. Poirot stood smoothly. Captain Black, we are investigating the circumstances of Mr. Maltraverse's death. You will make yourself available for questions, yes, of course. Anything I can do to help. As Poirot conducted polite farewells, I found myself studying Mrs. Maltraverse. Despite her pallor, despite the red-rimmed eyes, her cheeks bore heavy rouge. Thick, deliberately applied. In mourning, such vanity seemed peculiar. Or was it concealment? Outside, Poirot manufactured an excuse about leaving his walking stick. Promised to return for it tomorrow, and we departed swiftly. Poirot, what on earth, not here Hastings, walk naturally. We go to the village inn. The Anchor Inn was a modest establishment with low ceilings and the smell of cooking mutton. The innkeeper, a stout man with shrewd eyes, confirmed Black's story readily enough. Captain Black's been here since Tuesday, quiet gentleman. Kept to himself mostly, received a telegram Wednesday afternoon, seemed troubled by it. But he's caused no problems. Poirot arranged to call upon Black that evening for formal questions. Then we retreated to a quiet corner table. Hastings, you see the problem. Black was here Tuesday. Maltraverse died Wednesday. And Black is still here, not on a ship to Africa, précisément. The timing, it is too perfect, too convenient. Black dines with Maltraverse Tuesday evening. Wednesday, Maltraverse dies. Black, who should be at sea, is instead at a village in mere miles away. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And Mrs. Maltraverse, she was terrified to see him, not surprised. Terrified, you think they're in it together. The widow and the captain, I think, mon ami, that coincidences exist, but I distrust them profoundly. Tonight we interview Captain Black, but we must be subtle, psychological. We must make him reveal what he does not intend to reveal, that evening. The private parlor at the Anchor Inn was close and quiet. Captain Black sat across from Poirot, his posture military straight despite the informal setting. A single lamp cast shadows across the worn table between them. Captain Black, you will indulge me in a small exercise. I will say a word, you respond immediately with the first word that enters your mind. Do not think, simply answer. Poirot's voice was gentle, almost hypnotic. Black shifted uncomfortably. I suppose so. Though I don't see how. Death, inevitable, Tuesday, dinner, Africa, delayed, rifle. Black hesitated. Just a fraction. Hunting's mouths, another pause longer. Tropical. Poirot leaned forward. And now, mon capitaine, you will tell me about the story you told at dinner Tuesday evening. The story about the rifle and the mouth, the color drained from Black's weathered face. Good God, you can't think I was just telling a story. Something I'd witnessed in Kenya, a native tracker, despondent over some tribal matter. He'd taken a rook rifle, placed the barrel in his mouth, used his toe to. Black stopped abruptly. My story, someone used my story. Your story, it provided the method, yes, but that's impossible. It was just conversation. Maltraverse was fascinated, asked several questions about the angle, the mechanics. Black's voice cracked. Christ and his wife was there. She heard every word. You understand now, yes, Mrs. Maltraverse, she listened very carefully to your tale. She learned exactly how such a thing could be arranged. Black buried his face in his hands. I gave her the blueprint for murder. You could not have known, mon ami. But now you will help me. Mrs. Maltraverse, she is a woman of superstitions, deeply so. Always consulting mediums, reading fortunes and tea leaves. Maltraverse used to mock her for it. Poirot's eyes glittered with satisfaction. Then tonight we shall give her ghosts. The return to Marsden Manor found Mrs. Maltraverse in black silk, her face still heavily powdered and rouged. Poirot insisted on taking evening tea in the drawing-room, speaking in soothing tones about formalities, insurance requirements, the unfortunate necessity of investigation. Then precisely at 8 o'clock, the parlor maid's scream shattered the genteel atmosphere. The girls stumbled into the drawing-room, white as chalk. I saw him, the master, standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at me with such terrible eyes. Mrs. Maltraverse's teacup clattered against its saucer. That's impossible. You're hysterical. I saw what I saw, ma'am. The maid fled toward the kitchen. In the silence that followed, 3 distinct taps sounded against the window. Tap, tap. Tap, it is merely the ivy, madame, Poirot said calmly. The wind, it moves the branches. But Mrs. Maltraverse had gone rigid, her eyes fixed on the darkened glass. I moved to examine the window, but Poirot gestured me back to my seat. The room felt suddenly colder, though the fire burned steadily in the grate. The drawing-room door, which Mrs. Maltraverse had locked after the maid's departure, swung slowly open. The latch clicked, released by invisible hands. The house is settling, I offered weakly, though my own pulse had quickened. Mrs. Maltraverse rose unsteadily. Something is wrong. Something is here. She moved to close the door, turned the key deliberately in the lock. The latch held for perhaps 10 seconds before clicking open again. The door drifted inward. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. Perhaps the maid, she did see something. The electric lights began to flicker. Once, twice, then darkness consumed the room. Mrs. Maltraverse's breathing came in short, panicked gasps. What's happening? What's? 3 thunderous raps echoed through the blackness. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, reverberating through the walls themselves. Then came the glow, at first just a faint phosphorescence near the doorway. It brightened, taking shape, a figure, tall, male. The features swam into terrible clarity. Mr. Maltraverse's face, greenish and luminous, eyes hollow and accusing. The spectral mouth hung open, a dark cavity from which blood seemed to seep in black rivulets down the glowing chin. The ghost raised one arm, pointing directly at Mrs. Maltraverse. She made a sound like a wounded animal. No, no, you're not real. Her hands flew to her face, and when she pulled them away, they were stained red. In the phosphorescent light, the liquid on her palms looked exactly like blood. It won't come off, she scrubbed frantically at her hands. The blood won't come off, madame, Poirot's voice cut through her hysteria. What blood? His blood. I killed him. I put my finger on the trigger and pressed. The words tumbled out in a torrent. He was showing me how the rifle worked, demonstrating the angle like Captain Black described. And I said, like this, and I pulled the trigger. I pulled it, the lights blazed back to life with shocking suddenness. The ghost stood revealed as a tall man in theatrical makeup, his phosphorescent paint garish in the electric light. He removed the false teeth that had created the bloody mouth effect, looking mildly apologetic. "His makeup is excellent, no," Poirot said pleasantly, "Mr. Jarvis from the Provincial Theatre Company, most professional, Mrs. Maltraverse stared at her hands. The red paint gleamed wetly, obviously paint now, obviously theatrical. Her face crumpled. "You tricked me. You murdered your husband, madame." "I merely provided the means for you to confess it." "Poirot," I couldn't contain my horror. "This is monstrous. You tortured her with psychological manipulation, staged an elaborate. She committed murder, Hastings." She heard Captain Black's story and saw opportunity. She induced her husband to demonstrate the rifle's mechanism, then deliberately pulled the trigger, but you can't know it was deliberate. She said she pulled it, but perhaps it was an accident. Poirot's voice was ice. Then why the terror when Captain Black appeared? Why the rouge to hide the guilt flush in her cheeks? Why the contradiction in the doctor's statement about the angle? The train to London clattered through the darkness, carrying us away from Marsden Manor and its ghosts, real and manufactured. Mrs. Maltraverse had been taken into custody. The insurance company would be notified. Justice of a sort had been served. "You see, mon ami," Poirot explained, settling into his seat, "the physical evidence was insufficient. The doctor's confusion about the angle, yes. The widow's excessive makeup, her terror at seeing black, these were suggestive but not proof. The rifle had been handled by both parties. There were no witnesses. Without confession, she would have inherited everything, so you became judge and executioner. You decided her guilt and engineered her breakdown. I decided nothing. She decided when she placed her finger on that trigger. Whether she pulled it by accident or design," Poirot shrugged. "The guilt, it consumed her. That guilt was real, Hastings. That guilt was proof. But was it accident or murder?" Poirot gazed out at the passing darkness. "Does it matter? She created the circumstances. She heard the method and saw opportunity. She induced the demonstration, and when the moment came, her finger pressed the trigger. Accident," his voice was soft, almost sad. "The guilty heart. It knows its own truth." The lights of London appeared on the horizon, promising civilization, order, normalcy. But I found myself wondering, as the train pulled into the station, whether Poirot's methods were justice or something darker, something that haunted me as surely as any phosphorescent ghost. The case was closed, but the question remained.